So, hi, I'm Fabrice Grinda. I'm a founding partner of FJ Labs. We're a marketplace venture capitalist, and we invest in hundreds, well, about 100 marketplace startups every year. We have over 600 companies in the portfolio, and I have the pleasure of being joined on stage today by Ilir, who's the CEO of Slice, and I'll let him talk about what that is. Little rules of engagement. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. They'll be sent to me, and I'll ask them if appropriate later. Right, Ilir.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat. Proud to have you an investor at Slice. And what we are is the leading marketplace in the US for local pizza, which happens to be a massive industry, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's so many changes happening in like the future of food, the future of food delivery, et cetera. I'm excited to have you here. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about like how you got started in this, because if I'm not mistaken, you have a lot of background or personal connection to pizza.
Yeah, I come from 3 generations of small business pizzeria owners, including my grandfather. We owned a pizza shop in Manhattan called Charlie's Pizza. And that was way back in the 70s, in fact, before I was born. Fast forward to today, over 30 family members own small business pizzerias, really nationwide. And coming from the tech business, I had a tech support company. A lot of friends and family members started approaching me, asking for help with online, websites and online ordering. I realized that there was an opportunity to kind of meet the needs of all these initially family members, and the consistency at which they operate helped me realize that there's an opportunity to create a vertical solution for this one massive category.
The thing is that when I told other venture capitalists, oh, I invested in Slice, they're a vertical pizza delivery company, they all told me, like, that's ridiculous. Why would you need a vertical pizza marketplace when you have like Uber Eats and DoorDash and Seamless Grubhub? I mean, I don't know if you faced that same question when you started fundraising, but why is there a need? Like, isn't everyone losing money in food delivery?
I mean, it's so I get the question all the time. It's a fair question. We're fundamentally different. We're actually a mobile ordering solution, an e-commerce solution for the local pizza industry. One of our main products is our marketplace, but in essence, our goal is to digitally transform every small business so that they're more on par with what Domino's is doing in terms of digital volume. And what that does is it drives efficiency for the small business and it drives value for the consumer. So for Slice, it's not simply about delivery. It's about changing the behavior of the consumer from predominantly telephone ordering to mobile ordering and making that experience really, really rewarding. So that's one. I think the second thing is, pizza in the US is a very unique category. It's a staple. It's a $47 billion a year industry. That's revenue that passes through about 77,000 locations. And the vast majority of that is offline. And also the overwhelming majority of that is in the suburbs and long tail fragmented markets, highly, highly distributed geographically. I mean, think about it. Every town in the country has a pizzeria. And so for Slice, our goal is to lead with specialization around the category and ultimately create the most valuable brand in the industry. In essence, the world's largest pizza chain.
Maybe it's also a very fundamental approach, right? Like all the other food delivery or marketplaces, they see themselves as, oh, we let consumers order, and the other side you have the restaurants. And here, you do a lot more than just picking an order. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you basically take over kind of all the back office of the pizzeria, and you can pick up the phone for them. You'll answer the questions on Yelp and TripAdvisor, and you let the pizzeria owner just cook pizzas, which is what they love doing.
Absolutely. I mean, so look, I've got, as I mentioned, family members. What I know is that my uncle or, my cousin, they have no business. They didn't go into business to solve the business challenges of a pizzeria. They went into business because they're passionate about the craft and they really want to own and control their own destiny. But as I say, like, they have no business advertising. So I'll give you an example. Collectively, our 14,000 locations spent about $300 million in marketing last year. Inefficient marketing that is not measured, that is just anecdotal. And so that's just one example. What we want to do is we want to repurpose those funds in order to make sure that we're spending that capital in a way that's driving more value for the business. And then you can go into fintech. So payments, they're all buying independently. We're bringing buying power for payment processing as an example. We think about things like solving for payroll. How do you, distribute capital to suppliers? And then just more on the technology side, powering their website, powering their presence across the internet, Google, Facebook. We have a direct relationship with Google Food Ordering, with Instagram, Nextdoor, TripAdvisor, so I can keep going down the list. So yeah, it's an all-in-one solution. In essence, it's what Domino's corporate offers their franchisees. We bring that same level of depth and vertical integration to the small business industry without sacrificing their creative freedom.
And I mean, you touched upon the fact that in a way you're a vertical of these horizontal or multi-category sites. Is that a trend in food in general, or do you expect more of that to happen on a go-forward basis, or is that already happening? Or
it's happening in a couple of categories. I'm a huge fan of a company called Chowbus. I know you're an investor there as well. They're tackling the Asian food category, and they're doing a really good job. They're growing quickly. It really depends. I don't know how many categories within food specifically can support a vertical play, because the TAM starts getting pretty small over time. The reality is that pizza dominates takeout and delivery nationwide. And it's the most frequent category as a result. I would say the only other category that I would argue can support such a model is the Mexican cuisine category. And so you've got pizza, Asian, Mexican cuisine. Beyond that, it just kind of fragments incredibly.
Sure. I mean, many people think also that like the categories kind of played out, like food delivery. They're like, oh, the winners have been established. But how far along in the journey towards online food delivery are we? Like, how much growth is there still? And what do you think the latest trends, like cloud kitchens, robotization, whatever, plant-based, lab-grown meat? I mean, or anything else you're seeing in the industry that might be relevant?
Yeah, look, I would say we're still in the very early stages of this transformation, digital transformation in the food industry. Again, delivery is one aspect, but I'll give you an example. In the pizza industry, pickup is the larger segment of the TAM. 51% of all orders are pickup orders, not because delivery is not available. It's because the consumer prefers to pick up because they're out and about, and it's the fastest way for them to get that product. And so we think about solving for pickup, we think about solving for delivery, but really we think about digitally transforming, those consumer behaviors. And so where we are today, still in the single digits, so less than 10% of all pizza delivery and pickup volume is digital today. Over 90% remains offline, and that's either the telephone or people just randomly walking into some of these locations. And I would argue then that's consistent, if not even more prevalent across other categories.
And do you think that goes to what percentage over what type period of time? I mean, obviously it's guesstimate, but to get a sense of how big you think this gets.
I think COVID has definitely accelerated that transformation the way it has with other categories in e-commerce. But I do believe when you look at comps, and I look at Domino's as an example, 70% of Domino's volume is digital, to the point where, I mean, they're talking about shutting off their phone numbers and just being all digital. That's powerful. And it's powerful because it costs a lot less to operate a Domino's as a result. It's a very efficient model. And so the question for me is, why can't the small business segment support that same level of digitization? And I would argue that applies to all categories. We know that it's a better consumer experience. We know that it could be a more valuable, rewarding experience. And so I don't think there's a limit. I mean, fast forward 5 years from now, I think overwhelming majority of volume is going to be digital.
Okay, so over 50% of orders digital within 5 years. And do you think that's true across all categories? Like if I'm not mistaken, right now, like food delivery as a percentage of like food eaten in the U.S. is like 5%. Maybe it increased during COVID, but it's very low relative to people going to restaurants, and very low relative to people buying groceries and cooking for themselves. How high do you think this goes, and over what type of time period?
Yeah, look, I think delivery will continue to grow. I don't agree with, there's a whole narrative that delivery is just going to be how people consume. and there's going to be no need for restaurants. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think delivery is going to continue to grow, but I think it'll probably be no more than, call it 20-25% of all of the entire industry in terms of restaurants and grocery. I think people love the experience of going out and sitting down and socializing. I think people love the experience of cooking. And I think, we make the mistake of making the assumption that people are cooking because delivery is not available. That's not true. So I think it'll continue to grow. I don't see it growing from, as greater than 25% of the TAM.
Okay. And so what do you think of the latest trends in tech, like cloud kitchens, robotization, or lab grown, or anything else you're seeing that's really transformational to the industry?
Yeah, look, I'm actually a big fan of cloud kitchens, but in very specific geographies. I'm a big fan of cloud kitchens in highly dense urban markets. It's a really good way to expand the reach of some of the brands that consumers know and love. But when I look at the suburbs and I look at the pizza industry specifically, I don't see the trade-off being worth it. By that I mean, the cloud kitchen gives you some economies of scale around real estate, specifically rent, and then obviously all the equipment and all that, all the spend that's required to open up a location is already there. But then the trade-off is you've got to pay 30% for Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub to then deliver that product. So, again, in urban markets where Grubhub, Uber Eats, and DoorDash manage such a significant chunk of the volume already, that trade-off is worth it. When you look at the suburbs, I mean, look, my brother-in-law pays about $2,500 in rent per month, sorry. And so for that $2,500, he gets the benefit of having his brand really visible in that hyper-local market. He gets the benefit of people walking in, recognizing, and it's called Rustoni's Pizza. It's great. I don't know that he would be better off trading that for a cloud kitchen. In fact, you'd probably lose.
And robotization, is that coming to like the way the food is being prepared, or do you lose some of the magic when you do that, or is it does it have specific use cases in terms of like high velocity specific dishes or something like that?
I think robotics. Look, there's always going to be a play for robotics, especially in the more commoditized products. So let's say for chain products like Domino's or Pizza Hut, I would argue you can probably recreate their product using robotics because it's a very, call it, unauthentic experience. But for small businesses, I think robotics can play an amazing role in solving some of the tedious tasks that have to do with preparing for making pizza. So how do you make the dough? How do you make the sauce? And all those all those efforts are manual today. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity there. But then I think people are just creative creatures by habit. And so I do not envision small business owners switching to robotics to make their pizzas. That's their passion. That's their craft. They take a lot of pride in that. And yeah, I don't see that becoming a common thing in the coming years,
Sure.
Not for the small business industry.
I mean, COVID has been like devastating for restaurants in general. I mean, how much of the revenues have you been able to save by the ones affiliated with Slice? Like how have you been helping them deal with the situation? Because obviously, if you can't have indoor dining, if you have limited outdoor seating, I mean, restaurants really wanted the hardest, if not the hardest, industry during COVID.
Yeah, no, we've seen both sides of the spectrum. We have partners in our network that have been more traditional restaurants who are now scrambling to switch to a pickup delivery model centric. And then we have overwhelming majority of our network is your traditional pickup and delivery pizzeria that has a very small footprint and it's just churning out product at high volumes. That latter segment is crushing it. I mean, they're doing incredibly well. They've been incredibly resilient. And one of the big components of that is really what Slice has brought forward, which is the digital channels. And the reason for that is a lot of part-time employees stopped showing up because they didn't want to risk their health. Well, those part-time employees are responsible for answering the phone. They're responsible for doing other tasks. And so if digital was not present, then the owner would be answering the phone. And then, you got a domino effect there where they're not then focusing on the other more important tasks of the business. So what we've seen is a doubling of same store sales as we track it for the locations for whom pickup and delivery is primary, and they're on Slice. They've done incredibly well. The ones that have a larger footprint, I think they're using digital and pickup and delivery as a stopgap, but fundamentally at the core, it's a flawed model relative to COVID. And so they're just buying time, but eventually I don't think they'll make it.
And are most pizzerias actually at their core, even prior to working or independently working with Slice, like pickup and delivery?
For the pizza industry, yes. The vast majority of the category is pickup and delivery. It's your corner local pizzeria. They've been delivering for decades. It's low cost, travels well, highly frequent category. And that's how most pizzerias make their money.
So I think earlier in the conversation, you said something about the fact that if you're, for instance, Cloud Kitchen, you're delivering on DoorDash and Uber Eats, they take 30%. I mean, your pricing strategy is fundamentally different from that. Can you explain what it is, maybe how it's evolved over time, and how could you afford to charge so much less?
Yeah, we've got a fundamentally different model where, I'll explain the basics and then I'll go into why. So we charge $2.25 per order. And there's a processing fee that we pass through to the locations for credit card transactions. Our average order value is about $35. And so what that amounts to is about 6% per order is what the small business is paying Slice for our solution. Now, it is capped per order. It's $2.25 per order. Why is that? Well, online orders, digital orders, fundamentally have a much higher AOV. And by capping our take rate, we're passing that upside back to the small business. In essence, a Slice order, including our fee, is more valuable for the pizzeria than a telephone order. Now, when those economics start when the pizzeria owner starts realizing those economics, they prefer Slice orders over phone orders. And that is step number one in helping them realize that digital is more important than the telephone. I would say the second one is we're built fundamentally to digitally transform these locations to the point where 50, 60, 70% of their volume is passing through Slice. And at the core, if our take rate model was any different or resembled DoorDash, that business would not be able to sustain that take rate. They just wouldn't. So we take a very merchant-friendly approach. I would say the second reason is, for the most part, we go after loyal customers. So what we want to do is we want to take existing customers of a pizzeria and we want to make them more valuable. So we want to improve their average order value and we want to improve their frequency. And we can do that once we have their record online. But if they're ordering by phone, when was the last time a pizzeria reached out to you because you ordered by phone? They'll mail a menu. That's their version of CRM. So we're designed for loyalty first, and we're designed as a merchant-friendly platform.
But how does the delivery happen? Because obviously with 6%, with $2.25 an order, you can't afford to pay a delivery person.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of our network has what we call first-party delivery. They're doing the delivery in-house, and we're introducing technology to make that more efficient and leveraging data, the data of online orders, to give them predictions and predict the volume curves in order to make sure that they have enough drivers or don't have too many drivers. We also have launched Slice Delivery, which in essence is an aggregation of logistics players, white label and third party. And we're using our network scale to lower the cost of that solution. So that's, call it a network of other delivery partners who compete for the business of the pizzeria.
I think recently you said that you launched something called Slice Accelerate. What is that?
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Slice Accelerate is really us realizing our vision. So over time, we have solved for elements of this digital transformation independent from one another, in order to test the efficacy and how well they'll perform. And what we've now realized is that we can incredibly accelerate the performance of any small business pizzeria by having our team come in and refresh the brand of the location, in essence, help the owner realize their own vision for their brand. What does that do? It gives the consumer in that geography a lot of confidence in that location. And you can go to slicelife.com. There's a big link there for Accelerate. You'll see some before and after photos of Pizza Mia. Step 2 is introduce a really compelling value prop for the consumer so that if they're thinking of ordering by phone, they cannot ignore this digital value prop that exists only on Slice. Step 3, communicate that value prop across every consumer touch point. It's on the store sign, it's inside the store, it's on the boxes, on the cups, menus. I mean, anywhere the consumer interacts with that local business, the value prop for digital is prominent and clear and simple. Apply that brand and value prop to their digital presence on Google, Facebook, Instagram, and you go down that list. Plug in a point of sale solution so we have access to 100% of the data. So we know the consumer behavior across all channels. And when we run that kind of a program, in essence, and it costs about $15,000 to implement, when we do that, the volume of the business, what we've seen with Pizza Mia as an example, their volume, the digital volume tripled within months. And their overall volume, their revenue improved by 100%. So we're now applying this program to 100 locations and eventually thousands of locations.
So you have 13,000 mom and pop pizzerias signed currently on the marketplace out of the 7,000 pizzerias in the US, and you have 100 that are moving to Accelerate, you said?
Correct, 100, and for 2021, our goal is to get to 1,000 locations.
And how does that work? Like you charge them for it, or you just go, or they just opt in, and then you come in and you like redo the marketing, redo the branding, and help them. Like, how fundamentally different is it from an interaction relative to what you do normally?
Yeah, in essence, it's we don't charge them anything different. This is all Slice bringing that value forward, and the result is that the digital volume for that location on Slice triples, if not quadruples. And where Slice earns the revenue is through the $2.25 per order, which is our typical fee for digital transactions. And so it plays out really well. In essence, we actually get less than a year payback on the $15,000 investment.
Okay, cool. Anything we haven't covered, you think that you should mention about Slice, what are you doing, or how you're moving forward?
Yeah, no, look, we're doing incredibly well. We just crossed $1 billion in lifetime transactions. It took me 10 years to get there, and what we're excited about is we're on track to do over $1 billion in transactions in 2021. That represents triple digits growth, and yeah, for anyone who's watching and wants to join our team, go check out slicelife.com or download the Slice app. And there's a ton of roles we're hiring for. Aside from that, just excited as usual to continue executing.
So we have a bunch of questions from the audience. So to what extent do you see Uber Eats as a competitor? And are you competing with them on the supply side and the demand side, on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of competitive with Uber Eats, but look, over 90% of pizza restaurants are in fragmented long tail suburban markets where Uber Eats doesn't even register. Uber Eats is strong, and by default, aggregators get pulled into the most dense urban markets because they need supply diversity, which is restaurant diversity, that only exists in big cities like Manhattan. They need density to make logistics economics work. So they need to be able to deliver multiple orders. And they need, quite honestly, an affluent consumer. They need a consumer who, whose household income isn't $48,000 per year in order to afford ordering sushi, once every week. And so by default, these models get pulled into cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and that leaves the overwhelming majority of the country where, again, for the most part, they're either ordering fast food or they're ordering pizza or Chinese takeout. And look, this is where DoorDash has won. They unlocked fast food. That's what they do. They do that incredibly well. And so For Uber Eats, we don't really run into them much, and it's by default a very different business model.
Yeah, and maybe on the demand side, frankly, you're really converting existing clients of the restaurants that are ordering offline to online. So you're not really going in and acquiring customers online. So you're not necessarily competing at all on the demand side.
Yeah, to that point, Fabrice,
Yeah.
we'll acquire over 5 million consumers in 2020, all at no cost, zero cost. So.
Yeah, because you're converting the existing
Yep.
existing orders. When do you realize when you have network effects in a specific region?
I think it's when, to be quite honest, when your costs start going down. So
what type costs are you referring to?
When the cost of acquiring not only consumers but retaining consumers and then acquiring the remaining balance of the pizzerias, when that starts happening organically and your inbound funnel starts coming in just organically as well, network effects kick in. But then you look at your retention curves and where do they flatten?
And so how are you acquiring the restaurants? Is that in person? Do you have a sales team? Do you call them? Do they inbound?
It's all three, but predominantly we have an amazing inside sales team, and that's our primary function of acquiring restaurants. The second one is inbound. We get a lot of restaurants that call in. It's the beauty of being vertically focused. Our brand is synonymous with their brand. It's a no-brainer. And now we've got a small outside sales team that is going after what we call anchor locations. These are the higher volume shops that typically tend to be the holdouts because they don't feel like they need more volume or more sales.
Anything you've learned in the last 2 or 3 years of building this company that maybe is not obvious or controversial or?
Yeah, there's always lessons. I mean, I'll be honest, there's lessons every single day, every single week. I would say as we've gone from an earlier stage startup to now a growth stage startup, what I've learned is that my responsibility and my role fundamentally has to change. I've learned to move much quicker and faster with hiring better talent and graduating talent because different stages require different leaders, and not to frown upon that. That's not a problem. That's actually a good thing. Different people want to build different stage of companies, and the reality is when you graduate, moving fast to graduate the team as well is really important. That's been my number one lesson.
Maybe last question, I think, because it's better if we end a few minutes early from a timing perspective here is, do you think this vertical food play can work in international markets like Europe, given the smaller TAM or maybe the smaller different market structure?
Yeah, I think it could work in any market because the consumer behavior relative to, in terms of how they interact with takeout and delivery restaurants isn't any different in international markets. And so if the participating parties are consistent and all that's different is the geography, then I would argue, the same model can be applied in any geography where the TAM merits the effort. It's really more of a TAM question for me. I know in.
So are you going to Canada, or have you gone to Canada yet, or
we have not international? We have not because we've got a lot of room to grow in the U.S. And look, we'll do $1 billion in transactions in 2020. Small businesses will process 30 billion in transactions in 2021 in the US alone. So we're 1/30th of the volume. Obviously there's TAM expansion as an opportunity as well. So we've got so much, a lot of room to grow here.
Do you think this is you're a $5-10 billion business in whatever, 5 years, 10 years?
I want to get to 6 billion GMV within 3 years.
Cool, that'd be fantastic. Well, Ilir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.